The experiment that turned boys into enemies. Robbers. Cave. The fragile mind of a child. There are moments in psychology when the curtain between innocence and brutality suddenly falls away. Moments when the world is forced to realize that darkness doesn't wait until adulthood. It doesn't need trauma or history or ideology to grow. Sometimes, all it needs is the right environment and the right push. There are moments when children, not soldiers, not criminals, not adults hardened by life, reveal something unsettling about human nature, something that textbooks try to explain, that experts try to measure, but that most people try to forget, that the line between cooperation and conflict is frighteningly thin. In the summer of 1954, in a quiet forest in Oklahoma, that line was crossed. A group of 11-year-old boys arrived at what they believed was an ordinary summer camp. They stepped off the bus with the kind of excitement only children can feel. A mixture of curiosity, nervousness, and the hope of making new friends. No parents, no distractions, no supervision they could see. Just sunlight filtering through the trees, cabins waiting to be explored, a lake shimmering in the distance, and the promise of 3 weeks filled with games, hiking, swimming, and adventure. At least, that's what they thought. Because this wasn't a camp, not really. It was an experiment, one of the most ambitious and ethically questionable studies in the history of social psychology. And the boys were not campers at all. They were unwitting subjects, hand-picked and carefully observed, their every reaction measured by hidden researchers who watched from behind trees, cabins, and microphones. These children had no idea that their innocence was about to be dissected. The experiment was designed to answer a question most people don't dare confront. How fast can ordinary children be turned into enemies? Not adults, not people shaped by years of distrust or political division, but children, clean slates, still forming their identities, still believing that the world is fair. The researchers believed they knew the answer. They thought conflict was predictable, manageable even, something they could provoke and contain like a controlled burn. But what they discovered went far beyond anything they expected. Because when you manipulate belonging, when you weaponize identity, when you split people into us and them, even without reason, something ancient awakens, something primal. This is the story of the Robbers Cave experiment, a study that manipulated children, sparked violence, and revealed a truth about human beings that most would rather ignore. A truth we continue to see in societies, communities, in nations, and in everyday life. A truth that doesn't simply describe others, but reflects something within us. In the quiet woods of Oklahoma, far from the chaos of cities and the pressures of modern life, researchers peeled back the surface of human nature, and what they found was darker than anyone expected. The perfect subjects. In June of 1954, 22 boys, healthy, middle-class, well-adjusted, stepped off a bus and into the wilderness of Robbers Cave State Park. They walked out carrying nothing but duffel bags and the kind of excitement that only comes with summer break. The air was warm, the forest alive, and for these boys, the world ahead felt like pure freedom. No boy knew any of the others. Not a single familiar face. No cousins, no classmates, no neighbors. Each of them believed this was a chance to start fresh, to reinvent themselves, to become more confident, more adventurous, more grown up. They didn't know they had been chosen precisely because they were strangers. No boy had brought a phone, a toy, or even a personal belonging beyond the basics, not because they forgot, but because the researchers told their parents not to pack anything that might distract them. The parents signed papers believing this was a harmless leadership development camp, a chance for their kids to learn teamwork, responsibility, and independence. Something that looked good on paper, and even better in a world eager to build future leaders. But what those parents didn't know was that the psychologists running the study had selected these boys for one single, calculated reason. They were normal. No behavioral problems, no mental health issues, no history of aggression, nothing unusual in their backgrounds. These were children who blended into the crowd, children who represented the closest thing psychologists could find to a clean slate, the average human personality. Because only then could they test the question they were afraid to ask directly. Is conflict something we learn, or something that sleeps inside us, waiting to be activated? Among the boys was one we'll call Tom. Quiet, gentle, shy, but hopeful. The kind of child who wants to belong more than anything, even if he won't admit it. Another was Eric, energetic, confident, naturally charismatic. Every group has someone like him, the boy who becomes a leader without even trying. To the researchers, these weren't just children. They were ingredients, pieces of a psychological puzzle. And the plan was simple. Split the boys into two isolated groups. Let them bond. Introduce conflict. Watch what happens. But watching is too gentle a word. They weren't observers. They weren't instructors. They weren't counselors. They were engineers. Architects of an artificial reality built to expose the roots of tribalism, step by step, like scientists dissecting human nature with a scalpel. What the boys thought would be a summer of fun was actually the beginning of one of the most controversial social experiments ever conducted. The formation of tribes. For the first week, the two groups lived completely separately, not separated by fences or locked doors, but by something far more powerful: ignorance of the other group's existence. One group named themselves the Rattlers, a name that hinted at danger, toughness, and instinct. A name boys choose when they want to feel strong, even if they're not. The other group chose the Eagles, cleaner, nobler, almost heroic, a symbol of pride, discipline, and order. Names that seem childish and innocent until you understand what they were about to become. Because names, even simple ones, are the seeds of identity. And once an identity forms, it grows roots. Each group developed its own culture. The Rattlers quickly adopted a rough, competitive identity. They cursed loudly, bragged about small victories, and staked claim to open areas of the camp as if planting flags in conquered territory. For them, toughness was currency, and dominance was safety. The Eagles, meanwhile, built something entirely different. They prided themselves on being organized, clean, disciplined. They made their beds neatly, followed instructions closely, and worked together with an almost military precision that surprised even the researchers. Two cultures slowly formed, shaped not by history or heritage, but by the invisible hand of the experiment itself. And all of it happened without either group knowing the other even existed. But the researchers knew. They watched as identity took shape like wet clay molded by invisible forces. And they intentionally fed this identity building through shared tasks that forced cooperation, group-only activities that deepened loyalty, cooperative challenges that rewarded teamwork, private rituals that gave each group its own mythology, songs that bonded them, flags they designed, and symbols they painted and wore with pride. Nothing creates belonging like a common goal, and nothing creates loyalty like separation from outsiders. Inside each group, a powerful force was awakening: in-group bias, the instinct to protect those who are one of us, even if us was created randomly. By the end of the first week, the boys were already using words like us, ours, and our group, words that revealed a boundary forming where none had existed before. They didn't know it yet, but the researchers had finished step one. The tribes were formed. Identity had taken root. Loyalty had crystallized. Now the experiment could begin, because only when a tribe exists can an enemy be created. The discovery of the other. The moment the boys first learned there was another group of kids in the camp, something shifted instantly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. The kind of shift you notice only when you look closely at human behavior. It began with small comments, whispered almost casually. Who are they? Why didn't we meet them before? What do they do over there? Simple questions. But inside each one, a new mental boundary was being drawn. Curiosity is the first stage. Competition is the second. And it didn't take long for curiosity to turn into something sharper. Researchers deliberately arranged situations where one group would accidentally see the other using their field, their equipment, or standing inside what they believed was their territory. A baseball diamond, a table in the mess hall, a trail through the woods. Nothing truly belonged to either group, but ownership is not always logical, it's emotional. And the boys responded exactly as the researchers predicted. Territorial instinct. Fast, natural, automatic. One boy from the Rattlers muttered under his breath, "Why are they on our baseball diamond?" Just a sentence, just a moment. But inside that question hides something ancient, a reflex older than civilization, older than language, older than memory. The boys hadn't met. They hadn't spoken. They hadn't exchanged a single word or shared a single object. But they were already forming opinions, already building categories in their minds, already deciding who belonged and who didn't. And all of it happened without a single act of harm. Because conflict doesn't begin with violence. It begins with separation, with whispers, with glimpses, with noticing that someone else is taking up space that you think should be yours. Humans don't wait for hostility to choose sides. We choose sides the moment we realize there are sides. Because in the human mind, the moment we learn there is us, we instinctively prepare for them. It's not taught. It's not learned. It's not forced. It's triggered. And in the quiet woods of Oklahoma, that trigger had just been pulled. The first sparks of conflict. The researchers knew exactly what they were doing when they introduced the next phase: competition. It wasn't presented as something sinister or manipulative. To the boys, it looked like harmless fun, simple games, friendly challenges, the kind of activities any summer camp might organize. But underneath the surface, every event, every rule, every reward had been crafted with precision. This wasn't entertainment. It was ignition. Winners would get prizes. Losers would get nothing. That one detail alone changed everything. It transformed games into territory, and territory into identity. The moment the boys heard the word prize, the mood shifted. Their voices sharpened. Their posture changed. For the first time, there was something real at stake, something to win and something to lose. The games themselves were simple: tug of war, baseball, foot races, treasure hunts, but the outcomes were anything but simple. As soon as competition began, the atmosphere changed. Friendly faces hardened. Rules, which had once been a shared understanding, became weapons. Every decision was questioned. Every call was challenged. Every advantage looked like an injustice. Tom, the shy boy from earlier, became an easy target. When he stumbled during a race, the laughter from the opposing team hit harder than the fall itself. He wasn't just slow, he was a liability. And liabilities in a tribal setting become symbols of weakness. Eric, meanwhile, loud, confident, magnetic, rose effortlessly into the role of leadership. His voice cut through the noise, commanding attention. Children who had known him for less than a week followed him without hesitation. It took less than a day for the insults to start. "You guys are weak. Cheaters. Stay on your side." Simple words, but heavy with meaning. The researchers didn't intervene. They didn't calm the boys down or remind them it was just a game. Instead, they observed with clinical fascination as ordinary children, kids who had been cooperative and kind just a week earlier, transformed into rivals, fueled by pride, fear, and a growing sense of superiority. With each defeat, the tension escalated. With each victory, pride swelled. Boys began guarding their cabins as if defending territory. They patrolled trails, keeping watch for the enemy. They hid objects from each other, took shortcuts, cheated subtly or openly, anything that could give their group the slightest advantage. Slowly, competition stopped being about games at all. It became a question of identity. Who are we? Who are they? And which one of us deserves to win? Competition had done its job. The tribes were no longer just groups. They were enemies. Violence in the wilderness. Then came the moment the researchers had been waiting for. The moment the experiment tipped from rivalry into hostility. Until this point, the boys were loud, competitive, emotional, but still operating within the subtle boundaries that children intuitively respect. But one night, that boundary dissolved. After losing a game they believed they should have won, one group quietly entered the other's cabin under cover of darkness. There were no adults watching, no rules, no supervision, just anger and the freedom to act on it. Mattresses were overturned, suitcases emptied, clothes thrown into the dirt, and treasured belongings destroyed. It was fast, chaotic, and deliberate. A silent message written in broken possessions. The next morning, the reaction was explosive. Accusations flew instantly. Voices rose. The blame was immediate and absolute. The researchers pretended to be shocked, pretended to restore order, pretended to mediate. But in reality, they were carefully provoking the conflict, nudging it forward while acting like innocent bystanders. When the Eagles won a prize later that week, the researchers handed them shiny new pocket knives, fully aware of the risk. These weren't toys. These were real blades, given to angry boys already locked in an escalating rivalry. And the consequences nearly turned the experiment into a disaster. During a heated confrontation, one boy hurled a rock and struck another child in the face. Blood followed, crying, fear. You'd expect shock or guilt or regret, something that signaled the boys had crossed a line they didn't mean to cross. But instead, the opposite happened. His group cheered, because in their eyes, he wasn't a child who had hurt someone. He was a defender, a symbol of strength, a soldier protecting his tribe. That was the moment the researchers realized the experiment was no longer controlled. It wasn't theoretical, it wasn't symbolic, it was real. They had created a conflict too authentic, too raw, too human to neatly contain. In the quiet woods of Oklahoma, the camp had transformed into a battleground. Engineers of peace, forcing cooperation. The psychologists wanted to answer a second question. If you can create conflict out of thin air, can you also create peace? They had already proven how easily children could be divided, how quickly identity could harden into hostility, how rivalry could turn into aggression. But conflict is only one side of human behavior. The researchers wanted to know whether unity could be manufactured just as easily, or whether peace required something deeper than separation. They tried simple solutions first, the kinds of things adults often suggest when children argue: shared meals, joint activities, group conversations. But none of it worked. The boys refused to sit together. They refused to share tables. They refused to even look at each other. The hostility had settled too deeply. It wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was identity. And identities don't dissolve just because someone asks nicely. So the researchers escalated. If ordinary cooperation wouldn't work, they would create situations where working together wasn't optional. It was the only way forward. They staged manufactured crises, fake emergencies designed to be too difficult for either group to solve alone. A water pipe broke, threatening the entire camp's supply. A supply truck got stuck on a remote road. A shared resource ran out without warning. Suddenly, the boys were faced with tasks no single group could accomplish. They needed numbers. They needed manpower. They needed each other. So they were forced to join efforts, pulling ropes together, fixing equipment side by side, pushing the heavy supply truck up a hill as a unified force. At first, they worked with cold silence. They didn't exchange words. They didn't make eye contact. They performed the tasks like two rival teams reluctantly trapped in the same job. But slowly, something shifted. A shared goal began dissolving the boundary that competition had created. A moment of frustration turned into a shared laugh. A mistake became a chance for encouragement. One boy offered another a tool, then another shared food. Small gestures, insignificant on their own, but powerful when repeated. Cooperation began rewriting the story they had been living inside. By the end of the week, something that had seemed impossible was happening naturally. The boys were talking, joking, playing games together again. The tension that had once defined every interaction faded as if it had never existed. And then came the final moment. The one the researchers didn't orchestrate at all. When it was time to go home, the boys from both groups boarded the same bus, singing the same songs, as if friendship had always been there, and violence had never existed. They didn't know it, but they were leaving behind one of the most unsettling lessons in psychology. And as they drove away, the researchers took notes quietly. They had their answer. Just as conflict can be engineered, so can cooperation. But the forces required to fix what was broken were far heavier than the ones used to break it. What Robbers Cave reveals about us. The Robbers Cave experiment remains one of the most disturbing studies in psychology, not because of what the boys did, but because of how easily they did it. Nothing about their behavior required history or politics or years of indoctrination. There were no lectures, no propaganda, no cultural conflicts shaping them. The hostility, the tribalism, the violence, it all emerged naturally, effortlessly, as if it were quietly waiting beneath the surface. It didn't take history. It didn't take politics. It didn't take ideology. All it took were a few simple ingredients: separation, identity, competition, scarcity, and authority. With those elements in place, ordinary children, children who had never met, who had no reason to dislike each other, became enemies in a matter of days. And with a different set of ingredients, ones built on cooperation and shared crises, they shifted back just as quickly. The transformation was unsettling because it revealed how malleable human behavior truly is, how thin the line is between harmony and division, how easily we can be shaped. The experiment revealed something chilling. Human conflict is not born from hatred. Hatred is born from conflict. First we divide, and then we justify the division. First, we form a group, and then we decide who doesn't belong to it. We divide quickly. We unite slowly. And the gap between those two states, conflict and cooperation, is far thinner and far more unstable than most people would ever want to believe. In the end, the boys returned home unaware of what had been done to them. They didn't know how their minds had been shaped, nudged, manipulated, or observed. They had no idea that their behavior would become a blueprint for understanding tribalism around the world. To them, it was just a summer camp. A strange one, maybe. Intense, unforgettable, but still just a camp. But to the world, what happened in those woods became a haunting lesson, a reminder that the line between peace and tribalism is fragile, that the forces which divide us are frighteningly easy to trigger, that under the right conditions, even the most ordinary people can be pushed toward rivalry, aggression, and loyalty that blinds them to the humanity of others. And perhaps the most unsettling lesson of all is this: if children can be shaped so quickly, what does that say about adults? If you want more deep dives into the darkest corners of human psychology, experiments, and real-world behavior, subscribe to Dark Logic. Every week we uncover the patterns beneath society, the ones we pretend not to see, but the ones shaping us far more than we realize.